Half the countryside came to London today for a rally by thousands of farmers against the government.
Farmers from across the country, from Yorkshire, from Somerset, working with the Met Police to bring about 500 tractors outside Downing Street, angry at, of course, the inheritance tax reforms announced in the budget last year.
Just after dawn, as grey light crept over the Thames, an internal assessment circulated quietly through government channels. It warned of a convergence point, economic shock, public anger, and institutional overload unfolding in the heart of London. According to sources close to the situation, what began as a policy dispute had escalated into something far more volatile. Streets normally reserved for commuters and tourists were being transformed into pressure zones. Officials described it as unprecedented, and what followed would expose just how deep the crisis now runs. Early that morning, tractors rolled where buses usually passed. Long lines of heavy machinery clogged arterial roads leading into central London, their engines idling like a warning. Reports suggest the first alarms were triggered when major shopping districts began closing without notice. Families were ushered out of malls, metal shutters slammed down, sirens echoed between glass towers as confused crowds tried to understand what was happening. According to internal assessments, police units were redeployed faster than command systems could track. Communication fractured. Officers on the ground described being overwhelmed, not by a single act of violence, but by the sheer scale of disorder spreading simultaneously across multiple zones. Witnesses later recalled the soundscape: horns blaring, helicopters circling, shouted instructions drowned out by engine noise. Small clashes broke out at intersections. Not riots, not yet, but flashes of anger. A thrown object here, a scuffle there. Shop owners locked doors as panic rippled outward. Critics argue this moment marked the realisation inside government that the situation was not isolated, it was coordinated, and it was only beginning. By mid-morning, analysts inside secure rooms began piecing together fragments of data: transport disruptions, online mobilisation, funding trails. What emerged was not a spontaneous uprising, but a web of overlapping pressures that had been building for years. According to internal assessments, a fictional organised network had learned to exploit systemic weaknesses, leveraging asylum processes, housing contracts, and legal loopholes to generate profit and influence. Shell charities moved money invisibly. Logistics routes overlapped with legitimate supply chains. Smuggling coordination blurred into grey zones of legality. At the centre of several critical decisions stood a single high-ranking official, known publicly only by title. Sources close to the situation claim this figure championed policies that relaxed oversight in the name of efficiency and compassion. But as investigators reviewed the timeline, a darker interpretation emerged. This wasn't failure, one analyst reportedly said. It was facilitation. The system didn't break. It was bent slowly, deliberately, until pressure found its release point on the streets of London. Emergency meetings followed in rapid succession. Windowless rooms, phones vibrating non-stop. According to reports, enforcement operations were proposed, targeted raids, accelerated deportation procedures, immediate border tightening. Briefings warned that delay would embolden unrest, yet every proposed action met resistance. Courts issued temporary blocks, advisory panels urged caution, internal memos vanished. Critics argue there were signs of sabotage, decisions slowed, orders softened, accountability blurred. The machinery of response ground against itself. Outside, public anger rose, protest lines thickened. Farmers, already squeezed by economic policy shifts and what they called a death tax on generational land transfers, stood shoulder to shoulder with small business owners and transport workers. What united them was not ideology, but exhaustion, a sense that no one was listening. According to sources close to the situation, chants shifted from policy demands to broader accusations of betrayal. As paralysis set in at the top, consequences spread outward. Knife crime surged in surrounding boroughs, robberies spiked near transport hubs, long-suppressed grooming scandals resurfaced in online forums, fueling rage. Reports suggest frontline officers felt trapped between directives and reality, told to de-escalate online speech while street crime multiplied. Parents spoke of fear walking children to school. Shop owners described paying for private security. Officers, speaking anonymously, admitted morale was collapsing. Public perception hardened around the idea of a two-tier reality: unequal justice, selective enforcement. According to critics, some crimes were pursued relentlessly, others quietly deprioritized. Trust drained away. The social contract, fragile at the best of times, began to fray, and yet most people remained silent. Fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of consequences. Polling hinted at overwhelming dissatisfaction, but streets remained cautious. Online, enforcement was swift and visible. On the ground, crimes went unanswered. It was anger without release, a nation holding its breath. Sources close to the situation warned that pressure without outlets does not dissipate, it concentrates. In the closing hours of that day, as tractors finally withdrew and police lines thinned, officials spoke cautiously of de-escalation, but analysts knew better. Collapse, they argued, is rarely dramatic at first. It is administrative, procedural, moral. Power avoids responsibility. Silence fills the gaps. Families adapt. Communities withdraw. Social trust erodes grain by grain. And then suddenly, something gives. London's streets returned to motion, but the tension remained, unresolved, unnamed. According to internal assessments, the question was no longer whether consequences would come, but when, and who would be held accountable when they did. Just after midnight in the heart of London, an internal assessment marked urgent began circulating between senior desks. It warned of a convergence point, economic stress, policy paralysis, and public unrest colliding in ways the system was never designed to absorb. According to sources close to the situation, this was no longer a slow-building problem. It was a moment. Early morning hours, central London, and a claim that would have been unthinkable only months earlier. Control was slipping, and the public could feel it. What follows is not a single protest, not a single failure, but a chain reaction that exposed how deep the crisis had already gone. It began as dawn broke over the city. Transport hubs reported unusual congestion, not the normal commuter rush, but clusters of people moving with purpose. According to reports, farming vehicles had been seen on arterial routes leading toward Westminster. Markets in outer boroughs delayed opening. Shop owners in central districts pulled shutters down halfway, unsure whether this was a demonstration or something more volatile. By the time the first radio calls crackled across police channels, the tone had shifted from curiosity to concern. Sirens cut through the early morning quiet. A shopping complex near a major junction was evacuated after scuffles broke out between protesters and counter-protesters. Families were ushered out through service corridors. Children cried as parents tried to understand what was happening. Officers formed lines, then broke them, then reformed again as crowd density surged beyond predictions. According to internal assessments, deployment models were already outdated by the time boots hit the pavement. This was not a riot in the traditional sense. It was disordered pressure. Tractors blocked roads meant for buses. Handwritten signs referenced taxes, livelihoods, and betrayal. Critics argue the message itself was less important than the mood. A visible loss of patience. Reports suggest emergency response units were stretched thin as multiple flashpoints appeared across the city within the same hour. This wasn't coordinated chaos, but it wasn't random either. By mid-morning, senior officers acknowledged what frontline units already knew. This was not an isolated incident. Similar disturbances were being reported in other regions, smaller in scale but identical in tone. According to sources close to the situation, the protests were acting as a release valve for something much larger. Years of unresolved pressure around borders, enforcement, housing and crime, now magnified by economic shock. Behind closed doors, analysts began pulling data, not from social media, but from housing contracts, asylum processing backlogs, and emergency accommodation spending. What they found raised alarms. According to internal reviews, a fictional but highly organised network had embedded itself within the system. Not a gang in the traditional sense, but a web of facilitators exploiting legal grey zones. Shell charities applied for grants. Logistics companies won temporary housing contracts. Legal representatives filed repeat appeals, each one delaying removals by months. Reports suggest these operations didn't break the system. They learned it. Routes were mapped, not across borders alone, but across paperwork. Applications were staggered, addresses rotated, accountability dissolved between departments. This wasn't failure, one fictional investigator later claimed. It was facilitation. The system didn't collapse under pressure. It bent to it. At the centre of this web sat a fictional high-ranking official, not named, not elected, but positioned where policy met procurement. According to critics, decisions made under the banner of compassion and efficiency quietly removed safeguards. Oversight committees were streamlined, audits delayed, red flags reclassified as administrative noise, none of it illegal on paper. All of it devastating in practice. Emergency meetings followed. The Prime Minister convened advisors. The Home Secretary demanded options. Police commanders warned of capacity limits. Proposed actions were drafted quickly. Targeted enforcement operations, accelerated removals, tightened border intake thresholds. On paper, it looked decisive. In reality, the resistance surfaced just as fast. According to internal assessments, courts issued temporary blocks. Advocacy groups launched challenges. Departments disputed jurisdiction. Files stalled on desks marked pending review. Inside the system, some called it caution, others called it sabotage. Frontline officers reported arrest and release cycles that drained morale. Sources close to the situation claim intelligence briefings were softened before reaching decision makers. Each delay fed the same outcome. Nothing moved fast enough to matter. Outside, the public noticed. Protests grew louder. Not just farmers now, but shop owners, transport workers, parents. They spoke about safety, about fairness, about feeling managed rather than protected. Knife incidents dominated local news cycles. Robberies rose in commercial zones already struggling to survive. Long-running investigations into exploitation scandals resurfaced, reopening wounds that had never healed. According to critics, a two-tier reality had formed, one where online speech was policed aggressively, while street-level crime felt untouchable. One where compliance was demanded, but security was conditional. Parents spoke of changing routes to school. Shopkeepers installed shutters instead of displays. Frontline officers admitted quietly that trust was evaporating. By the time polling data reached ministers, the numbers told a different story than public statements. Anger without release, fear without language. A nation holding its breath, unsure whether speaking would fix anything or make it worse. Reports suggest the silence was not acceptance but compression, because collapse, as history shows, is rarely loud at first. It is procedural. It is delayed meetings and deferred decisions. It is families adapting quietly until adaptation becomes survival. Communities don't break when laws fail. They break when trust does. And as night fell again over London, the question hanging over the city was no longer about one protest, one policy, or one official. It was about whether anyone still had the authority or the courage to change the trajectory before pressure turned into something irreversible.